Ladies and gentlemen, I believe and congratulations are in order. Well done, because if you're watching this video, then chances are you're very close to or have actually just completed your very first gaming PC. But you've probably got one question on your mind, which is, what's next? How do I go from this box that lights up to actually having a gaming PC that's playing games, has Windows installed, and is optimized to actually get the best out of your system? Because if I think back to my very first gaming PC that I built, I made so many mistakes in the actual setup stage that I didn't literally know for years there are so many things I could have done to actually make my experience better. So throughout this video, we're going to show you everything that you can do to actually optimize your gaming PC, including installing Windows, going through the BIOS, everything that you need to know, showing you what to install, how to actually get your games on the system in the first place, and as I say, a load of optimizations to make sure you get the most out of your gaming PC and get the best performance. So stay tuned as we go through literally everything you need to know right after a short word from this video sponsor. Do you want to get into PC gaming but don't want to build it yourself? Chill Blast's new Edge series has just launched with the incredible Height by 60 enclosure, offering a truly stunning gaming system with all of the parts and cables expertly assembled and managed for you, so all you need to do is pick your favourite title and start gaming. All Chill Blast PCs are built in the United Kingdom with free UK delivery and a 5-year warranty. Learn more today with the link down below. Rightio then everybody, let's keep this as straightforward and as simple and easy to follow as possible. And I will actually begin by saying that I'm going to start at the same stage as you, which is that I've literally just built this a couple of weeks ago. I haven't touched it since. You can find it in the top right corner of your screen. This is actually my new personal rig in progress. We've got some other stuff to do. But once it's all built up and you've tested that everything lights up and it turns on, the first thing really that you're going to want to do if you haven't already is to grab yourself a USB flash drive. It doesn't have to be ginormous, but big enough to hold a copy of Windows on it. So you want to go to an existing PC or laptop, and then you just literally Google Windows 11 ISO, and then just follow all of the on-screen instructions to actually get a copy of Windows on here. The whole process shouldn't take too long at all. I think for me it was about 20 minutes, but obviously it depends on your download speed. And then you'll be greeted with a copy of Windows that's ready to go in the back of your system. You don't even need an activation key just yet. Obviously you will eventually, but if you don't have one now, then you can sort this out at a later stage. But in theory, assuming everything is set up properly, and when I say set up, I just mean everything's plugged in, I suppose, and everything works. Once you've got the flash drive and the copy of Windows in the back of your system, you literally just turn it on, and then you'll wait for the Windows splash screen to actually load automatically. You won't need to default to anything else in the BIOS. You won't need to change anything. You just need to let it do its thing. There we go. That's the color of Windows. So it literally just will pop up like this. You can see you just obviously need to change languages and things, but for me, it's United Kingdom. All of this stuff will actually have been pre-done for you when you originally install the copy of Windows, so it shouldn't take too long, to be honest. And you literally just want to hit install now. And this is the bit that, if you've got a brand new flash drive, should be very straightforward because it will just come up with one drive. But the one that I'm using here has an old copy of Windows on it where I've used that drive before. And if you do want to sort of start again and what we call a clean install, obviously this will delete everything. So don't do this unless you absolutely want to delete everything. But here I'm going to choose my copy of Windows, which is 11 Home. I'll hit next, I'll agree to the license, and then here I'm going to hit customized, and then here you can see I've got my drive that actually had a copy of Windows on it before. So it's got these things called partitions on them. So essentially the bit that's going to store all of your files is really massive, and then what we have basically called Windows Reserved, which are all of these mini partitions to make sure that you can actually boot into Windows in the first place. But we're going to want to delete all of those. Again, only do this if you want to actively remove your copy of Windows entirely. You can't undo this, so please be very careful. I'm just deleting all of those partitions, and then I have 2 drives in the system. And I will say that if you're unsure which is which, it's a little bit easier for me here because they're completely different sizes. But if you say have like 2 SSDs, one's faster than the other one, but they're both 1 terabyte or both 2 terabyte, I would highly advise to actually remove the drive that you don't want to install Windows on now. And this way it's going to stop you getting confused essentially, because there have been so many times that I've actually installed Windows on the wrong SSD, or it hasn't happened for a while, but I've had it before where you get like some of the files on one SSD and then like the bootloader or something on the other one, which means you need 2 drives to actually get your rig to work, which is a nightmare, and it will cause you headaches later on. So if you have multiple drives, just remove all of the drive apart from the one that you actually want. But here I have this 4 terabyte drive, so I'm going to hit new. I'm going to hit apply, and then it will automatically make those partitions that we deleted on the old version and then I hit next, and then it will literally just install Windows. Really, really straightforward. You don't need to worry about anything. It's not complicated, but again, please make sure that you're not deleting any files unless you actively want to delete them, because you can't undo that. I mean, that didn't take very long at all. That was about 3.5 minutes to install Windows, way quicker than it used to be if you remember installing it with one of those CD drives back in the day. But it should automatically restart, and then you'll be greeted with essentially the same screen as if you bought a brand new PC from Currys or something like that, where you need to log in with your Microsoft account and then get into the desktop. But yes, here we are. Eventually you will be greeted with the Windows desktop, and don't freak out if the screen goes black like that for a second and you think everything stopped working, because it's usually installing a graphics driver so that your screen actually displays properly. But yeah, there you go. That is your copy of Windows. Video over. Well done. Except it's definitely not, because while it would be very easy to think that now you're in Windows everything is great, there's still quite a long way to go to make sure everything is optimized. I mean, we haven't even talked about drivers and things, right, which is quite literally essential. But the first thing, before you do literally anything else, as tempting as I know it is to actually turn your PC off and restart it. Because before we actually get anything on here and we spend effort actually, well, setting things up, I want to make sure that at the BIOS level, everything is actually configured properly. And I know that sounds a little bit scary, but believe it or not, there's not actually too many things to go wrong here at all. I would also recommend updating your BIOS if you haven't already. You can find my full video about this in the top right corner of your screen, because it's not essential, but you can get better features and better performance. To get into the BIOS, just restart and mash the delete key and you'll be greeted with something like this. I'll be honest that the NZXT one that I've got here is not that well laid out. It's fine if you're an advanced user, but if you're a beginner, it sounds a little bit scary. But the main page on whatever BIOS you have usually tells you what you've got in your system. So here we've got a Ryzen 9 CPU. We've got, what's that, 48 gigabytes of RAM. So if something's missing, it's usually a good idea to actually look in your BIOS to see if it's registered properly, because if it's not, it might not be plugged in properly. But the first thing that I want to do before we do anything else is to actually get our memory to run at its full rated speed, because you've probably spent a load of money to get something that's really fast or has low latency, but if you don't change any settings in the BIOS, then it's going to run at this standard default lower speed, which is going to be pretty annoying. Over on this one, we're going to go into the overclocking tab, but it might be listed as memory for you, or if you have like a main page, it might literally just say at the bottom left-hand corner, Expo or XMP, which is Intel's Extreme Memory Profile. But essentially you're looking for anything that says memory profile or something along the lines of that, because you actually have these overclocking profiles that are actually physically on the memory sticks themselves, they're saved. So here we have DRAM profile configuration. And you can see I've actually already turned mine on, but by default it would be set to auto, which is actually just off. And you can see we've got the default, which with DDR5 memory is 4800 megahertz, but then there are two actually other profiles on here as well. So I can go for 7200, 7400, because this is pretty high in memory, but you essentially want to go for the fastest one that you actually can. So here I'm going to go for that 7400. Then we're also going to look for something called resizable bar or resize bar or above 4G decoding, any of those words, because this actually allows your graphics memory to talk to your PC properly, and so you can essentially get better performance in certain titles. And I did tell you that this one is actually laid out pretty poorly, because I have no idea where it is, and there's no search, so let's see if we can find it. Is it going to be under CPU? I doubt it. No. Is it going to be under PCI? Yes, actually, here it is. So as we said earlier, above 4G decoding, you want to make sure this is enabled, and then this will reveal something called resize bar support, and you want to turn this on to enabled. And this isn't going to necessarily be a night and day difference, but especially if you're using a modern graphics card or something like Intel Arc, this can give you loads of extra performance. And if this is not enabled in your system, then honestly, it can, as I say, cost you quite a lot of FPS. Now, of course, if you do feel comfortable, you can also do some overclocking in the BIOS, but this isn't something we're going to cover here today. There's usually like some presets and some AI optimized settings and things, but until you probably understand what the thermals of your system are, I would not recommend you change any of these settings. So instead, I'd recommend everyone goes into the fan tuning utility. Under here, it is PC monitoring, but it usually has its own thing that literally just says fan tuning. And essentially, you just want to put everything in silent mode. That's going to be the easiest thing. And I know that might sound like, well, what happens if everything starts getting really hot? I don't want my system to overheat. But all you're doing, and I don't understand why this isn't the default, is just changing the fan curve. So essentially, you're still having your fans to ramp up when they need to, but you're just adjusting how quiet they are when your system is idling like it is now. So it's very straightforward. You've got your CPU fan, obviously is like for your CPU cooler, and then you've got all of your case fans. So you just want to go along and put them all in the silent mode, or if you feel even more comfortable, you can actually customize these and set proper curves and things. But this, as I say, is a terrible BIOS really for beginners because it doesn't even give you a visualization of the curves. I kind of wish I'd done this video with something else. But anyway, you'd have like a graph view, and essentially you want it to be nice and low when the temperature is low, and then ramp up when the temperature gets high. And this way you can have a system that is very quiet. Now, if your PC is not that quiet in the BIOS when it's not doing anything, you have not configured your fans properly. Once all of that has been completed, you're then ready to save and exit. Please make sure that you do save, or obviously nothing will actually have been done. And all the list of changes will come up here. I haven't made any, so I don't have that option, but always do read through everything that has been changed. I mean, it might sound a little bit scary when you turn the XMP on, because obviously it will like apply different voltages and things to the memory modules, but if you're overclocking especially, you want to double check everything that you're doing. But once you have done that, you should then be ready to greet yourself with the Windows splash screen, and now you can actually start to set up things for real. And the very first thing I would always recommend that you do, if you don't do this already, is to go into your PC and find your main disk. So here we have the C drive, and literally just create a new folder, right? And call this games. Because if you don't do this now, your games are going to be all over the place, because when we like download Steam, when we download Epic Games and all of these things, it will say where do you want your games to actually be installed, and if you let them go with the default location, they're all over the place, especially Steam. If you don't know what Steam apps and common is, it gets really frustrating, whereas if you actually set it to this games folder, it is a lot easier to track. So do that now. And then the next step is we're going to want to update our device drivers, and essentially this is a list of instructions. So you have this hardware, you spent a load of money on it, but if you don't actually tell it how to work at its best, it's really wasteful and you lose performance. So if you're rocking an old graphics driver, including the one that's almost certainly been installed by default, then you're going to lose out on a load of performance and some games won't actually work. So if you're going with an Nvidia graphics card like we are here today, we type in Nvidia drivers into Google, but obviously if you've got Intel or AMD, you do the same, but with their name. One thing though that I will say that is actually different to the last time I made this video with my previous build a couple of years ago, is there is actually now something called the Nvidia app, and this is currently in beta, but maybe by the time you're watching this it will be out of beta. But this is actually a really nice, easy way to get all of your drivers and all of the optimizations in one place. So I've downloaded this now, but essentially you don't need to log in, you don't need to create an account. It literally just handles the drivers for you, but as we'll show you in just a bit, it can actually optimize all of your in-game settings as well. It can overclock your graphics card, and it can actually sort of show you all of the performance overlay statistics and things. So you don't necessarily need to download anything else. You can do everything that you're going to want to do with your gaming PC whilst playing games without any other downloads at all. So here we are then, all installed, and asked us whether we want a game-ready driver or a studio one, because if you're building a PC and you're using it for work, you probably want the studio drivers rather than Nvidia's gaming ones. You can also select whether to optimize the games automatically or not. I'm going to say no because I'm a pro, but this is definitely very good for beginners. Nvidia overlay, this is how you capture and record all of your gameplay as well. There's actually some encoders baked into the GPUs now, regardless of whether it's AMD, Intel or Nvidia, so it's not got like a really large overhead. It won't slow your game down if you want to capture whilst you're actually playing the games, which is cool. With that graphics driver installed, we can now move on to the next step, which is very straightforward but very essential, which is to go into show more options, right click on the desktop, go to display settings, all the way down to advanced display, and then just make sure that you're running at the full resolution and refresh rate of the screen that you have here. So for me, this is 4K at 144 Hz, but especially if you're rocking AMD for some reason, it likes to default down to the base 60 Hz. So this is obviously going to affect you if you've got high refresh rate monitor. Just make sure you're running at the highest settings possible. The next thing that I like to do might sound a little bit basic, but it is actually pretty important for me anyway, which is to make sure that I get the browser of choice. For me, it's Chrome, but actually I'm going to say regardless of what browser you want to use, Edge is actually pretty good now. I like to have the same browser on both my phone, my tablet, and of course my Windows PC, because this way you can sort of share history between all of them, tabs and things like that. It's something that's very easy to overlook, but it's pretty annoying to be using Safari on one and then Chrome on the other. So just make sure they all match up. Our next step, of course, is going to be to actually get some games on this system. And unfortunately, the worst thing about PC gaming is that everything is spread over so many different apps, right? And it's really frustrating. But I'd say that there are two that you definitely need third that's really useful, and then obviously everything else is a bonus. So pretty much everything, generally speaking, is on Steam. So download that now. If you've never used this before, it's by Valve, and as I say, it's got a massive library of games spanning literally decades at this point, and the vast majority of games are on here. This is what is almost like the preferred choice for PC gamers, but I would also advise that you do get Epic games, not only because there are some games that are on Epic only, but also because they actually have like a free game of the week, which is pretty cool. And if you install it, it will pop up at the bottom right hand corner of your screen, and then you'll see what games come up. And yes, a lot of them won't be relevant to you, but sometimes you'll see it pop up and go, yes, I want that, all because you installed Epic. Whilst those are downloading and installing, I'm also going to talk about voice chat, because pretty much the quintessential app that everyone needs on their gaming PC is called Discord. I mean, this actually, as we know, is now cross-platform, so you got this on both PlayStation and Xbox. I love to play Formula 1, and I play this with a lot of my friends that are over on Xbox, and everyone can then have voice chat all within the same thing, which is great. So if you don't already, I would highly advise that you get Discord, and of course, join the PC-centric Discord, which is linked down below. It's very fun and very engaging. I mean, Epic is actually disinstalled, so let's have a look what the free game of the week is. It's Marvel's Midnight Suns. Is that any good? If you're literally brand new to PC gaming, by the way, this is what Steam looks like when you buy a game. They pop up at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Yes, I've got quite a lot of games, and no, I've probably not played most of them. Let's pick one at random to download, shall we? Company Heroes 3. Let's go with that. You just hit install, and then do you remember I said it's going to want to like have all of our games downloading to the same place? This is where, before you get carried away, just hit on this little cog icon that says manage storage. Hit this C drive at the top, and then say add drive, and then you want to find that folder that says games. We'll select that. So we get Company Heroes installed, then we go over to our Epic, and we'll see if we can change that here as well. Let's go for Farming Sim, and then again it's trying to like put it in our Epic Games folder, but instead we just want to select that drive, or that folder I should say, that we made earlier. So we go to Games, and then we select OK, install, and then all of your games are now in one place. Another good application that I love to have on all of my personal rigs is this one called CCleaner, and it's not a necessity, but I find that it's quite helpful just for keeping track of where all of the large files and all of your storage is going on your system. There is a paid version that has more features, but I've always used the free, and it should be pretty much fine for most people. I mean, let's have a go. I know that this is like a brand new install, but let's see if there is actually anything to get rid of. It does have some offers in the free version, obviously. I think that can be expected. But if we go over to Custom Clean, we hit this Analyze button, and this doesn't actually delete anything, just shows you what can be deleted, and you can obviously select like on the boxes here what you do and don't want it to search and scan. Right, okay, so already 775 meg can be removed just from like temporary files and caches and things. So this is what I mean. It's pretty useful, especially if you have a smaller drive. Now, as I alluded to earlier, it's always a good idea to actually monitor your PC, in particular the temperatures, so you can see how it's performing. So especially if you've built it yourself, you want to make sure that everything is working properly. If you've got like a CPU cooler and your CPU is running at 95 degrees, then chances are it's either not set up properly or you haven't installed it properly. And there's a few different applications you can use to actually monitor temperatures and things like that. But the one I'm going to use here is NZXT's Cam. And the reason I'm using this rather than say like the Corsair iQ, which is also pretty good, is because I have this cooler here, which is actually an NZXT cooler. So obviously I need this to control the RGB fans if I was using those, but more for the LCD that we actually have in our system. As you can see, it is pretty minimalist software. There's not too much going on here. The main things really are to pay attention to your CPU and GPU, because obviously, as I say, if there's a problem, it will tell you. And I actually do have a problem at the moment, not just with life. That makes me sound like a bit depressed. I'm not. I'm actually pretty cheerful, I promise. You can see that the temperature around about 70 to 75 degrees, that is actually too high really for this sort of system. So this would lead you to believe that there's a problem, but it is an expected problem, because I just need to download the Lee software for these fans, and then essentially it's going to relay what the motherboard is telling it to the fans. But until I've actually got that software, it doesn't know what to do. So the CPU fans are barely spinning at the moment, which is why our CPU temperature is actually pretty high. But it's good to know that, because obviously we can diagnose the issue and thus resolve it. We also can see our system specifications in Cam. We can actually control the lighting as well. I was trying to update the firmware on our Kraken, but apparently it's failed. Oh no, retry. Okay, it's fixed itself. Weird. Let's change this to a dual infographic, and then I'll set that to be the temperature, and now I can see my CPU temperature and my GPU temperature actually on the cooler itself, which is really useful. I do actually recommend NZXT coolers if you want to go with one with a display, because they do work very well. But that's CAM anyway, useful regardless of whether you do have like their coolers or anything, or you just want to monitor the temperatures of your system. As of course you would expect, I'm also going to download the Lee & Lease software to get all of these fans to work properly, but you get the gist. Basically, depending on what you have in your system is what you need to download. If you're using Corsair fans, let's say get IQ. If you're controlling it all through the motherboard, then you can either get motherboard software or control it through the BIOS. It's going to be depending on the system that you have, but what most people will probably go for anyway is just the motherboard lighting software. So if you've got like a couple of fans and you plug them into an ARGB header, you can control them. But if you've got like case lighting or something like that, then you might not need any software at all. For some reason that seems to be taking ages, so I'll also move on to the next bit of software. This one is called MSI Afterburner, and I love this. There are loads of different options and alternatives to this, but essentially this was originally for GPU overclocking, which would get you better performance in game, but these days it's actually become really useful for monitoring not only your frame rate, but also your system statistics and things whilst you're playing a game. So if you've watched some of my videos recently, you might have seen like that orange text at the top left hand corner of your screen. This is actually MSI Afterburner, and this is currently my preferred choice of software to essentially see what you're doing whilst in game. You can monitor temperatures, RAM usage, you can see whether your game is GPU bottlenecked, CPU bottlenecked, so it'll give you an idea of what to upgrade into the future. It's just a really nice smart bit of software, and again, it's free. I'll move very quickly through this because I know it's not going to be relevant to anyone that doesn't have Lee & Lee fans, but this is what L-Connect 3 actually looks like, and then this is what I was alluding to again earlier. I essentially just needed to tune all of my fans so that they work based on the CPU temperature, and now I've got the software installed, it will do that. So I've set everything here, as you can see, to a quiet profile, but a little bit later I'll fine tune this with like a custom one on this little graph that we have here, and I'll probably set some of the fans to ramp up more for the GPU, and then some of them only for the CPU. But switching back to MSI Afterburner now, you can see this is what it looks like. Obviously it can get quite high tech, you can do some serious overclocking with this, but obviously only do so if you're aware of the risks. But essentially if you just want to play with the sliders, like increase the power and stuff, then that shouldn't really make any real difference, but it can give you a few extra FPS and it tends to be pretty safe. But if you want to use this as a monitoring tool, then just hit this little icon for the cog. Then you go over to monitoring, and then you'll have all of these statistics, and there are loads that you can actually have in game. So I usually like to have my temperatures, I like to have usage, I like to have like clock speeds and things like that, but you can have as much or as little as you want. But the main one really a lot of people want is obviously frame rate. So if you scroll all the way down, you can see where it says frame rate. You do need to make sure it's ticked, and then also tick this box that says show in on-screen display. And I've set mine up as both text and a graph, and then this way, obviously you're gonna get text and graph at the top right corner of your screen. Once you've set that up and got it enabled, you do also wanna go over to the on-screen display tab, hit more, and then this is how you actually resize it. It took me ages to work this out, so I'm glad I can put this in a video. You see you have this little 60 icon here, and this essentially shows you how big it is according to your screen, but where it says zoom, you can just scroll this to make it bigger or smaller. You can also change the colors and things, so you really can make this your own, but it's nice that it's really high tech, but as you can see, it's still pretty easy to use. But of course, we won't know if this actually works unless we fire up our game. So here we have Company of Heroes 3, and you can see, granted it's very, very small, I'm gonna have to increase the zoom. We now have our frame rate and apparently GPU2's power of 49 watts, but let me add a load more things to this and you can see it properly. And just like that, everybody, as promised, here we are then in a game of Company Heroes 3. This is actually running at 4K max settings, and we're crushing this with the 4090 around about 190 FPS. But it is great, isn't it, to be able to see all of those statistics at the top left-hand corner of your screen. You can assess to see if there's a problem, if something isn't being utilized properly, or if you're just curious, it's great to essentially see what's going on. And if you are getting micro stutter or something like that, then the frame time graph should be able to show you that. But it's certainly a good thing to have. But I would always recommend that you have a little hotkey as well so that you can turn this off, because when you're actively playing a game, to be honest, I find it distracting. But ultimately, it is all entirely down to you. And so then, ladies and gentlemen, if you can't already tell, your PC is now set up and ready to game. That is pretty much everything I do with my personal rig. I hope this video has been really useful. It's literally cost me my voice to produce this for you. So if you've enjoyed it, please smash the like button, get yourself subscribed, and if you do want to check out any more videos about building a PC, there are so many on the channel. I really hope they're helpful. And if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was actually featured in this rig, you can find that listed down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not take PC gaming to the next level with Chill Blast? Chill Blast's new Edge range looks the business, and is exactly what you've been waiting for. This Edge Vantage system rocks the Nvidia RTX 4070 Super, Intel i5 14600K, and the Height Y16 closure, so you're ready for pretty much anything. Get your PC from the UK's most awarded PC builder with a link down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.